So in this video, I'm going to be talking to you about how to get rid of or how to deal with fear of raising debt from banks, especially when the debt goes to an amount of millions of dollars. Now, when I was starting out with the acquisitions process and I was building the team, I was extremely fearful of this segment of the business model. And, you know, I was extremely apprehensive about this, and I had a lot of fear in the nights. I couldn't sleep at night because the closer I got to this point to dealing with the banks, the more fear I had, and I was unconsciously trying to delay that part as much as possible because I had this subconscious fear of raising capital from the banks. So I'm going to be talking to you about what causes this fear and how to deal with this fear. And there are many hidden layers of this fear that may be stopping you from doing great things, frankly. So I'm going to be talking to you about that, and I'm also going to be sharing with you some insights as to how to deal with not only the fear, but also the debt part of the equation, because the fear is not really irrational. And just to give you a little bit of a background about myself, if you don't know who I am, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm the founder of a healthcare investment company, which is based in UAE. And I'm in the business of, setting up a platform that would be acquiring several companies. And in the last couple of years, I have negotiated several multi-million dollar, negotiated with several multi-million dollar businesses. I have dealt with some of the most senior bankers that have financed, hundreds of millions of dollars in transactions and have financed multi-billion dollar companies. So I have had very intimate conversations with these bankers and gone through some of their financing process and done over, 100 presentations with different financial institutions. I have met almost all of the major banks which are based in UAE. There are over 26 banks that are in UAE, and I've met every single one of them. And not only that I've met these banks, I have met some of the most senior banking officials who have financed very large transactions, as I mentioned, a few $100 million. So I've been in several financial presentations, and the things could get very emotional for you, especially the one presenting the deal, and also for the banker. And there's a lot of emotion involved around money, but you're not dealing with an instrument or an aspect of money which is like sales, collecting money from customers. You're actually borrowing money from a highly regulated financial institution, and which is, can get very scary, and there are regulations, there are laws. So any area of business which has a lot of laws, you will have a lot of fear, and you should have a lot of fear because you're entering into a domain which is highly regulated. It's intricate, it's complex, it's technical. So there is a reason that the fear exists, and this fear is not entirely irrational. In fact, you should have some fear or apprehension. It's not a bad thing to have fear or apprehension. It's a good thing to have fear and apprehension because you would tend to take some extra precaution. And even if you have to check a few things, quite a few times, that's completely fine. If you have to have second thoughts, that's completely fine. When dealing with debt, you have to think about those things. So in this video, I'm going to be getting to the root cause of this fear. And the root cause is financial risk, right? Financial and legal and operational risks. And not only this is a regulated space, it has several risks. You have got macroeconomic risks, the risks that are related to the industry that you're getting into, the business, if you're buying a business, the risks around that, risks around the structure of the deal, the operational risks, right? Legal risks with the structure of the loan, several factors of interest rates changing. So you've got financial, operational, and legal risk. And so that's what the cause of debt. So that's one of the causes of debt, which is objective in nature, right? Which is something to do with practical realities. And then there is a fear or apprehension, which is more on the subjective side, something to do with your childhood conditioning, and something to do with what you might have observed your family's behavior around debt. Almost every single family has some level of debt which is personal in nature. Maybe it's backed by gold, or maybe someone in your family wanted to buy a house. So those kind of situations, when we are young, we observe them and our beliefs are forming around those subjects, and it hampers with our ability to deal with financial instruments like debt. And just like me, if you have not been in a business family, you know, debt is an instrument which is not very friendly to the family structure, especially the families who have not been in business. Business families tend to use debt, not always, but a lot of the big business families. For example, Donald Trump's father, who was in the real estate business, Donald Trump might have seen his father use debt, and it's just an instrument for someone like Donald Trump's father and Donald Trump. But if you were in a normal family, the even idea and concept of debt, to use it in business, can be very scary for subjective reasons and reasons based in childhood. So for example, I saw my mother borrowing capital education loan to fund my brother's education, and she had to pay off that loan using blood, sweat and tears, using labor, using her time, right? So that's a personal loan. And when we talk about using debt in business, it has a completely different context and it has a completely different nature. So it's not that all debt is bad, but you have to identify what is the nature of debt and what are you buying with that debt, and whatever you are buying, is that even valuable or not? So the quality and nature of debt simply depends on what you're buying and who pays off the loan. So in the case of my mother, she was paying for an education that may produce result or not, and the repayment was going to happen through her labor. Her personal time was on the line to pay off the debt. So that's one of the worst kind of structures. And that's why people have negative relationship with debt, is because, typically people use debt to buy a car or a house or, something else that they don't really need. And, they use debt and they have to pay it with their time. They have to put in time to generate income, and then they have to use their flesh, blood, and, flesh and blood to pay off this loan. So that is one of the worst kinds of debt. So if you're using debt to buy something that goes down in value, one, and second is it does not produce cash flow, then you should not be borrowing money. You should not be borrowing money to buy something that goes down in value and it doesn't produce cash flow. And your car is one of those things. It goes down in value and it doesn't produce cash flow. And the third thing is how it's repaid is with your time. So if you have these three elements, goes down in value, doesn't produce cash flow, and you have to pay it off but with your time, that's a bad debt. That's one of the worst kinds of debt, and you should not be using debt like that. So, I would put this aside. So there is a difference between a person and a business loan. In the context of acquisitions, when you go to buy a company that's already cash flow producing, you're buying an asset that has the potential of going up in value. It has a potential of appreciating in value. So now the nature of debt changes because of what you're buying. If you're buying something that goes up in value, one, and second, it produces cash flow on its own without using your personal time, it's already cash flowing, then the nature of debt is very different. And the cash flow is not produced by you actively being involved in the business necessarily. The cash flow is already being produced through employees that the company has and the customer base that the company has. So now, if you look at debt in this context, you are not paying this debt. First of all, the debt is not on your name. The debt is in the name of the company you're buying. And it's a little bit of a complex thing to get your head around, is because we are used to debt at a personal level, debt in your name. Most of the loans we take is on our name. But when you go to buy a company, acquire a company, you're not the borrower. The company that you're buying is the borrower. And the bank is not going to be interested in your personal financial statements. The bank is going to be interested in the business that you're buying, its financial statement. That is what would be considered to repay the loan, not your personal financial statement. And that's one of the reasons why, credit score, your personal credit score may not have anything to do with the transaction, because you are financing something that's cash flowing, and you are not the borrower. The company that you are acquiring is the borrower, because you and the company are separate entities. According to the government, you and the company you form are two distinct things. They're not the same. So you're not borrowing, the company's borrowing. So talking about the nature of debt, what do you buy from it? Does it go up or down in value? Does it cash flow or not? And third, who pays off the loan? And fourth, are you the borrower or the company is the borrower? So when we talk about acquisitions, the company you're buying is the borrower. The loan sits at that level, not at your personal books. And the cash flow is generated through employees and the customers. So your time is not necessarily used, although you may be involved in the management of the business, or you may have someone else managing it, but you have a group of people who are working actively to produce this cash flow. So one person is not on the line. There is a group of people on the line, and there is a customer base that's paying for, it has a customer base that's paying them money to run the business. Basically, sales. They're making sales from the customer that is used to pay off the debt. So the money doesn't come out of your pocket to pay off the debt. It comes out from the business's pocket, which is run by many people, not just one person. So the nature of the debt changes, right? Now, this does not guarantee everything's going to work out, obviously, but we are just creating a distinction between a personal loan, a business loan, and when you take loan to buy something that goes down in value and does not produce cash flow and uses your time to pay off, versus something that can go up in value, something that does produce cash flow, and it does not use necessarily a lot of your personal time to pay this off, because this business has systems and processes and it's already generating cash flow. So that's one reason why there is a negative relationship to debt. Is one of the reasons is lack of understanding of this distinction and how to use the debt in the right manner, in the proper manner, not buying something that goes down in value, doesn't produce cash flow, and actually takes a lot of your energy, and it essentially sucks your soul like the Dementors from Harry Potter. You don't want something sucking your soul like that. You want, debt when used to buy a company has a different nature to it, especially when the company has cash flow. So that's the distinction. And the other thing is person versus business loan. The other source of fear, coming back to objective reality. So first issue was lack of understanding, which is subjective in nature, and the basis of fear could be rooted in your childhood. And now we are getting into objective reality. Objective reality is that debt is a highly regulated space. So wherever there is regulation, there's going to be fear, because there is a consequence that you may have to face if you don't use this instrument properly. So there is fear because the government wants you to feel this fear so that you do good things, not bad things with the debt. So number one is legal compliance is extremely important. This is not an area where you lie or you misrepresent information. There will be severe consequences. Maybe in your personal life, when you lie, you can get away with it. But here, if you lie, there's going to be serious consequences. So you got to make sure that you're fully disclosing the information about the business you're buying and the nature of the financing and the purpose of the financing. All the details relating to the transaction, you have to disclose it completely. And you need financial advice. Just watching this video is not going to be enough. You need a financial advisor, a legal advisor, and a operational advisor to guide you through these complex territories. This video is only for the general information purposes and illuminate this possibility, but it's not enough for you to execute. So you need advisors. I can help you secure those advisors, but you still need advisors. So that's important to understand. So you gotta be very careful when you're dealing with debt. You have to be honest. So that's number one. Going beyond legal compliance, you will still have financial risks which are related to operations and the structure of the deal. So for example, just because an asset goes up in value and produces cash flow, just because of these two reasons, doesn't make that into a good deal. Okay? Because you could pay too much for that asset and that could be a bad deal, even though it may go up in value and it may produce cash flow. So it's not necessary that just because it's going to go up in value and produces cash flow, that makes it a good deal. No, not necessary. The business has to be valued at the right price. Okay? It has to be at the right price, and you have to pay as little as possible, obviously, and you have to buy the company from a motivated seller. Only then you would be able to pay less. So the price at which you're buying the business is extremely important. So that's another factor that affects the risk and the fear index of the entire deal. So next factor of fear is the structure of the deal, the nature of the deal. What is the price? Are you paying too much or too little? How do you know if you're paying too much or too little? And then that's one thing, is the valuation. We call this valuation. The second thing is, how is this payment made? Are you paying all upfront, or are you paying a little bit upfront and a little bit over time? If you pay a little bit upfront, then this upfront payment is going to be debt. So then your exposure is less in the deal. First of all, you're valuing the business conservatively, and you're not paying all the payment upfront. You're paying a little bit upfront and the rest is paid over time. So really your bank exposure in the deal may be very little. So this factor, the things that I'm mentioning, is called, the structure of the deal will determine the risk of the deal and will determine how much do you fear debt or not. Because if you structure it really wisely and your exposure is very little and you're paying it over a long period of time and you have sufficient cash flow which way exceeds your debt portion and your debt is very little and your cash flow is really big, then you will tend to feel comfortable with borrowing, right? So it's not really about fearing debt in all scenarios. In certain scenarios, you fear debt. In certain scenarios, you may feel comfortable with debt. And it all depends on the valuation, the type of business that you're buying, the cash flows that business has, the margins that business have, the risks that business has, and how you structure the deal, how you value the company, and how you make the payment. Like all of those factors, and more importantly, who is advising you on the transaction? Do you have a board of individuals who have done these things, who are advising you or not? This is not just about you walking into a company, raising capital from a bank and acquiring a business. No, that's not a wise way to do it. You need advisors who have had 25, 30 years of experience in legal, finance, accounting, and operations, right? To advise you on risks, because business has legal, finance, accounting, and operational aspects. So you have the opportunity to perform that risk analysis before you raise the money, before you get into the deal. You have the opportunity to list out all the risks and mitigate them by the way you structure the deal. You can mitigate the risks, and you can structure it in a way that you feel comfortable, your board feels comfortable with the transaction. Now, next risk, apart from the structure of the deal, is macroeconomic factors. What do I mean by that? So, we all know pandemic happened, COVID happened. How does something like that affects that entire industry? Business exists inside of a large industry. So, certain industries like oil and gas, even though it's a very good industry in good times, when things are happening which are negative in nature, oil price will start to shift, right? So the margin of the business keeps changing. So if you have an industry like oil and gas where oil price keeps changing, then raising debt on an asset, on an oil asset, can create a problem because it's a bit unpredictable macroeconomic wise. But if you look at healthcare, people still need to be treated for healthcare even in a recession time. And healthcare industry tends to be not recession proof, but recession resistant. Healthcare businesses, respond, they don't get too affected in recessions. I'm speaking general terms here, that there could be subsectors of healthcare that could get affected, but generally speaking, healthcare tends to be much better. So one thing is macroeconomic factors. How does that affect your industry? You don't evaluate these factors after getting into the deal. You evaluate these factors before getting into the deal, so that you have factored those in. And the bank that you talk to will have these factors in check. And that's why you should ask your bank, do you lend in your industry, the industry that you're getting into? Do you lend in that industry? Because some banks, have industry-specific risk profile. There are some industries the bank loves. There are some industries that bank does not love and does not want to do business with. So it has nothing to do with the deal that you have brought, nothing to do with your qualifications, nothing to do with your team. The bank does not finance that industry. It does not fit their risk criteria because they are taking decision based off of macroeconomic factors. So they don't want to deal with it just purely on that basis, without looking at the deal, without looking at the structure. And this happened, one of the banks I met, immediately in the first meeting, before I even presented the deal, before I even got into the deal, the bank said, listen, our bank does not like healthcare, so, just like we have had bad experience in the past, etc., etc. And sometimes it happens, a company which was not a good company went and borrowed money and didn't pay back. So the bank flags healthcare as a negative. Some banks which have made money will love healthcare. Others who have had some loss will tend to be very skeptical and cynical and give you bad vibes. So when I called this, they right away told me healthcare is a no-go, but we'll still look at the deal. They looked at the deal and they told me, no, we can't do healthcare, right? So that's macroeconomic factors, governing their decisions. Then you have profit margins. Again, when you're dealing with something like debt, you want the margins to be as big as possible. So healthcare tends to have 20 to 40% margins. And, that's a good wiggle room and a decent cash flow position for you to load it up with debt. If you have 6 to 8% margin or 8 to 12% margin, which is something you see in restaurants, it's not the best business to buy restaurants, because A, it's unstable industry, B, the margins are really little. So if you have a little bit of a profit, very little related to the revenue, and on top of it, you put debt on it, and on top of it, it's not macroeconomic, it's not stable from a macroeconomic standpoint, restaurants, then you are at a high risk industry, and it's unlikely you would be able to borrow money because the banks would know these things. So again, to summarize, you need the industry that you're getting into has to be stable, reliable, big margins, right? And has to have, decent amount of cash flow, and the bank should love it, all of those things. So these are, some complex reasons why you would feel apprehensive towards raising capital. Another reason that, now that I think about it, is also the way the revenue is structured, or the way the revenue is produced. The business that you're buying, you have to look at the revenue, and you would look at what is driving that revenue. Who is driving that revenue? In some businesses, you would have one person bringing 80 to 90% of the business. One person. So, which means most of the business is dependent on one person. And anything can happen with this person. They may want to change, start their own company. They may, get sick. Sometimes these people can be old, so they can get sick. They could get into an accident. So if you have concentrated risk with that one person, because 90% of the revenue is dependent on that person, you have a high risk. So it doesn't matter how you value the company, what purchase price you do, or how you structure the deal. That's a high risk proposition. I mean, you got to have a serious clause protecting this guy, locking him into the deal, to really feel secure, because this business is not in a secure position. And to load this business up with debt is going to be dangerous, no matter what the valuation. So these are the subtle dynamics I wanted to expose, and I wanted to share why you have this strong emotional response to something like debt. It is an instrument which is powerful. It is an instrument that has been used to create wealth, and it has also been used to get into trouble, right? So it's the way you use it. It's how you play with it. A lot of the rich people use it and play with it and leverage its power to acquire powerful positions on the positive side. And on the negative side, you have this fear, and you have all of these variables. And there are many more that, if you have a board, they will advise you on a transaction by transaction basis. And you can assess on a deal by deal basis whether it's a good deal, bad deal, should you raise money, should you not raise money. And if the deal is not good, the bank will tell you we cannot finance it. And the bank is doing you a favor by telling you that, because they have some reason why they don't want to finance it. And if they do want to finance it, then it's a validation that you have structured it in the right way. Final point is something that I wanted to mention, is that another thing that all of this depends on is data, right? Data. And what do I mean by that? Is what is the quality of financial information on which you're taking the decision? So when you are acquiring a company, you would look at its financials. Who audited the financials? Were they made in an Excel sheet, or did they have an external auditor? And, are they speaking the truth? There are some countries where people just plain lie in the financial books. So you may think you are looking at a legitimate financial statement, but they could be fabricated. In some other regions, the law is strict and people tend to be honest in their financial statements. And especially if it has a third-party validation, an auditor has, they have an audited financial statement, then it obviously has more credibility. And if the financial statements are audited by Big Four accounting firms, it has a tremendous amount of credibility. And not only the audited financials, but when you do due diligence, you will hire a third-party firm that you pay to look into the business and produce what is known as quality of earnings report. Meaning, they would analyze the past of the business, and they will produce a report as to how the business might do in the future years. They will have a conservative assessment as to how the business performs in the future years. So they would look at macroeconomic factors, they would look at changes in the industry, they would look at various dynamics within the business, and based on that and the past, how the business has performed over the last few years, how the business might do in the future. They would produce a report on that quality of earnings report, and they will also validate whether the current financial situation of the business is good or not, and what changes the business might face. For example, the business has a past, but you're not acquiring the past, you're acquiring the future of the business. So the variables in the future might change. For example, that one superstar employee may plan to retire next year or after 2 years. So when he retires after 2 years, there will be a dip in the cash flow. How can we correct that within this 2 years' time? So there is a change in variable. Just like that, there could be many variables that may change the cash flow position. So the accounting firm does this kind of risk analysis. You would have to do it yourself also, but all of that falls under data. How valid the data is there available for you to make an assessment to structure a deal? If you don't have good data, you can't structure a good deal because everything is done on this financial information. So a lot of the times when you do due diligence, you may find out the revenue was not $5 million. The revenue was actually 4.7. The profit was not 30%. It was actually 22%. And in the future, it might go to 18%. So now the valuation changes because there are variables which are changing. So data is also extremely important when you look at a deal and you structure it, and first you structure the deal and then you borrow. So all of it is connected with borrowing. Lesson: when you deal with debt and you feel fear, these are the reasons for it. It's not bad. It's an alert mechanism for you to be extra careful and be responsible, being honest, and also looking at the deal from various lenses, expertise, analyzing the variables, and structuring the deal in a shrewd manner so that not only you can pay off the loan, but you can make money on top of it. So do business wisely, responsibly, and look at companies properly, thoroughly, and structure the deal in a manner that you can reduce the risk as much as possible, and structure the transaction legally, that the business is the borrower, not you personally. So that's the video on how to deal with fear around debt and what causes it. There are subjective reasons and objective reasons. So if you like the video, hit that subscribe button and like button. And if you are interested in getting mentored by me, I have a group mentorship program that's coming on 29th May 2024. And if you're watching this video and that date has not hit, reach out to me on any of these links below. You could also get mentored by me one-on-one, and I also have that option available. So you could reach out to me and I will talk to you soon.